This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In this episode, we're talking to Taylor Quinn, Executive Director of Tailored Food. Taylor builds coalitions of local entrepreneurs, farmers, and institutions to create nutritious, affordable food products for people living in poverty. In today's episode, we're talking about the role of innovation. We talk about it across Africa and the world. We touch on the Africa Food System Forum and the role that plays in catalyzing this. You'll hear about Taylor's anthropological approach to food systems, discover his work across the world, from Liberia to Canada, and learn how his collaborations with major organizations like UNICEF and the World Food Programme are reshaping local food economies. Let's get into it. Well, Taylor, welcome to the show. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm an avid listener of the podcast, so I'm excited to be involved.
Now, we're going to dive into who are you and what are you working on, but I want to start out. You've worked with some significant organizations like UNICEF, the World Food Programme, the World Bank. So just take us back a little bit to the beginning of how did this all get started?
It's funny now that I spend most of my time working with these larger scale organizations. And this all might sound a little simplified, but to be honest, I just initially was really annoyed that my neighbors in the low-income community I lived in Monrovia, Liberia, back in 2015, 2016, I was really annoyed that my neighbors couldn't afford good quality food for their kids. You know, these were my friends I would hang out with the evenings and weekends after work, families that worked really hard, that had good quality jobs, whose kids were struggling with malnutrition and sometimes dying of malnutrition. And that just really frustrated me, that these were hardworking people who were making real salaries, and yet culturally relevant, affordable, nutritious food was not available to them. So I was 22 and didn't know much of anything, but luckily had a healthy amount of naivety and started working on food system issues.
Amazing. And so this was 22. You were 22. That was correct.
I was 22, yeah. And I was living in Liberia, in the capital city of Monrovia, and started working on the question of, is it possible to develop nutritious, culturally relevant foods that can be really, really tasty, but also radically affordable for low-income people?
So when you were in Liberia, was that part of the brief, or is that the brief that came from Liberia?
That was part of the brief that came from just my own learned experience in Liberia. I learned through the lived experiences of my neighbors and friends.
So as that fast forwards, how did you find yourself working across so many different sectors and countries in food systems? Because, you know, that kind of insight, I guess, or that challenge that you first had in Liberia has grown into a quite big piece of work.
Yeah, it took 2 years of trying and trialing and failing in Liberia, of working with various local agro-processors, working on different product concepts. Finally, eventually, after 2 years of a lot of failure, working with a group of farmers, we successfully designed and took to market a line of fermented and naturally locally flavored porridge products, fortified with a customized vitamin blend, radically affordable, sold in retail and school feeding programs and to hospitals and kind of a variety of stakeholders. But in short, I never necessarily planned to work outside of Liberia. Once the Liberia business was off the ground, I started going to conferences to try to learn from people much smarter than me on how to do a better job at what we were trying to do in Liberia. And as I started sharing what we were up to in Liberia, initially the World Food Programme, who said, hey, can you actually come help us do a similar thing in Congo? And I said, no, I'm here to learn. And, I don't think there's applicability, but we decided to give it a go. And Congo was successful with a really exciting business model. And so from there, learned that there was real applicability here. And so now I have my own little nonprofit where we work with small grassroots entrepreneurs. And as you mentioned, some of the world's largest food system actors. And we work in 34 countries, mostly in Africa, but also in Asia and Latin America. 34 countries today, yes.
And so through that process of building that, what's been some of the most valuable lessons from that kind of experience that you've learned?
I think one of the core things I've learned is that if when you're designing food products and kind of food system approaches, if you're designing for the lowest income consumer from day one, it forces you to be really, really innovative and to be really diligent around cost and around how to design your supply chain. I think there's kind of a core belief in the world of food, well, and in any product category, that you can start by selling to high income consumers and eventually you'll get to the scale needed to sell to low income people. Yes, that is sometimes true. But I would challenge other entrepreneurs out there. What if you design for the lowest income person from day one? How would you design your business model differently? Because we found if you design for the lowest income consumer from day one, it's much easier to then sell products to middle income, high income consumers. So certain factors, like for example, we don't use plastic packaging. We use banana leaves in some of the markets we work in. Not because it's more sustainable, of course it is, but actually just because it's cheaper. We use human generated electricity versus electricity from the grid in some of the communities we work in. Again, not because it's more sustainable, just because it's inherently cheaper in some of the contexts we work in. So making some of those economical decisions from day one that we honestly wouldn't have made if we said, hey, yeah, we're going to sell in fancy supermarkets initially, and then after 5 years, like we'll be at the scale we need. It was harder initially, but we've had to be more creative in how we design things.
So your journey started as an anthropologist, and how does that academic background influence your approach to food systems?
Yeah, so I think, and one of the things I absolutely love about the work of the Beans is How campaign and the SDG2 Advocacy Hub more broadly and the Chef's Manifesto is that it shifts a serious conversation about food systems that's often very academic in nature to one about talking about food as joy and food as culture and food as this fun, delicious thing that we all love and that we all have so much meaning around. And I think my background in anthropology, it forces me to look at food systems through that lens of like, hey, when you're talking to a mom in rural Malawi, let's talk about love and joy and family tradition and the things that make her excited rather than having a conversation about nutrition education and this and that. Because if you can design nutritious food products from that place of joy and excitement, then you're going to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that human element, I guess, is so critical for making things relevant as well, and relevant
Mhm.
from a taste perspective, from a cultural perspective, and really looking at that. So, tailored foods, how would you describe it in a sentence? Like, what is it?
So, Tailored Food, our little entity, we are a nonprofit organization that researches food system dynamics and scales up food system products and interventions. We do that work with small scale entrepreneurs directly and on behalf of UNICEF, Save the Children, World Bank, World Food Program, et cetera, et cetera. So we try to work kind of on both sides of the spectrum.
What's a practical example of something you've developed that you're super proud of?
So the it's one of our oldest examples, but the product and that I wouldn't even say developed, maybe reincarnated in Congo is probably the best example, or one of my favorites. So in Congo, we worked with the World Food Program, and we took a product which is called Mampala Pinda. It's a cassava-based, almost like protein bar that was popular in Congo first sometime in the 1800s, but it had never been commercially produced. It was always just something that, oh, maybe your grandmother in the rural community might make it, right? And so we took the Mampala Pinda product concept. We trained 160 small scale, community level women entrepreneurs on how to produce the Mampala Pinda at a larger scale and with food safe practices. And for the last 5 years, the World Food Program has been purchasing Mampala Pinda protein bars, which are packaged in banana leaves, made with local ingredients like cassava, soya, peanut, chili. And they're purchasing that for their school feeding program. And the Mampala Pinda bars are also sold in retail markets in cities like Point Noir and Brazzaville.
Amazing. And my understanding is how you produce that is also creating jobs and creating employment.
Totally, yeah. So our focus, a lot of the food aid sector, broadly speaking, is generally there's a large focus on the importation of food. And so a big focus for us is how do you localize production? And in some contexts, like in Congo, it might make more economical sense to decentralize production at the village level. In more developed economies like Kenya or Thailand, it makes sense to produce larger, kind of more modern commercial facilities that might look like a typical North American or European factory. So in each country, we're kind of trying to design fit for purpose, but yeah, trying to localize at every stage.
So one of the things that I guess when you're talking about this practical example in Congo is that it's a bar. Like when we think of food aid, we often don't think of snacks, I guess, or convenience. We think about providing raw grains. I know I've seen flour being given in big bags. So why is convenience so critical to consider in developing solutions?
One of my kind of favorite things to talk to families about when I'm doing the direct consumer research we do at Tailored Food is really just talking to primarily moms who are primarily the caregivers of children in most places in the world. Just talking to moms about what their days look like and what their responsibilities are. And whether you're talking about a mom here in Vancouver, Canada, where I'm based, or in rural Malawi or in Haiti, moms are busy. They have a lot on their plate and they don't necessarily have a lot of time. Especially in context of displacement, they might not even have access to a kitchen. And so the typical food aid model of handing out, to your point, flour and uncooked beans and oil, yes, that works in economies and in contexts where moms might have time. But in reality, people are looking for convenient foods. And that's why the rise of ultra processed, unhealthy snack foods is not just a trend in developed countries, but it's a trend all over the world. And so our goal is to kind of design for that time poverty aspect as well, where that's applicable.
Yeah, no, it's so critical. I mean, when we talk about food, cost, convenience, and taste, and you're dealing with the cost, you're talking about the convenience and also the taste, three critical levers for really making connection with food. So that's great. We last caught up in person at the African Food System Forum. Tell us a little bit about why were you there and what's important about those kinds of forums? What did you see?
Yeah, so it's so exciting for me, and I'm sure for you as well, to see where the sector is evolving. When I first started doing this work in Liberia almost 10 years ago, people said, oh, you're product developers. Oh, you work in agriculture. And we would say like, oh, actually, we work in like all these different areas. And now the language and the community around food systems as a concept is really, really robust. And so to be at something like the Africa Food Systems Forum is really exciting for us to see all the energy around it. We were there slightly wearing a hat of representing UNICEF, who's our primary partner. We work with UNICEF now in 28 countries. But we were also there sharing a little bit of the learnings of like what it looks like from a practical perspective to kind of boots on the ground at the grassroots level, design foods that are, to your point, affordable, convenient, and taste really, really good, and try to share some of those practical examples. The global forums, I find there's often like a lot of great conversation around high level policy and strategy, but it's important sometimes to root that in the practical examples of like, okay, if our policy is successful, here's what it would look like for an entrepreneur in Tanzania who's now producing a food product for their community.
And I guess with some of the challenges now facing the sector with cuts in ODA, shrinking, this kind of innovation and really focusing on impact is really critical. And so what do you see as some of those biggest opportunities for innovation?
I think, to your point, right now, we're in an unprecedented time of change for the development sector, whether you kind of like it or not. Us at Tailored Food, we have lost a couple of contracts with the changes to the US government assistance structure. And so, yeah, we're affected as well. And I think what this time is showing is that there's actually this huge opportunity to start thinking a little bit more like the private sector in looking at in a sector like food or agriculture. We have an opportunity in that people are paying real money every day for food. Even if they're a low income family, they're spending real cash on food. And so there's a business model there. There's a sustainable funding model. If you're a large NGO and you can design a model where you create a food product that's affordable enough, people will buy it and your program could be sustainable in the long run. So I think trying to take more of that financial sustainability mindset to development projects is what we're trying to do with our partners, and we're trying to push people towards, because I think the recent events show that the constant flow of money might not be forever.
No, I mean, I think it's so critical. So thinking about that and how do we develop these alternate solutions, utilizing all the different tools in our tool chest, I guess, is really critical. And so it's great to see how that's going. What's something you're really needing to kind of take it to the next level? What's something that's kind of keeping you occupied at the moment in terms of that ability to scale and really drive the next level of impact?
For us, I've been incredibly grateful and honestly surprised more times than not at the types of partners we've been able to work with. I think what we're hoping for in our next stage of growth is really to do more advocacy work to help shift the sector to really think and design programs thoughtfully around affordability, convenience, and taste, to your point. I think there's a lot of different schools of thought in the very kind of evolving, emerging food systems world. But to your point, affordability, convenience, and taste, if we're taking a human centered design approach, those three things have to be true. And to be honest, for a lot of programs and kind of a lot of methodologies out there, those three things aren't really considered so much. A lot of the food systems work that does happen is around nutrition education, and it looks at eaters as being, to be honest, not educated or just kind of like small minded. And that's not necessarily the reality. People are making really thoughtful decisions, but they're making those decisions within the context of how much money they have in their weekly budget, how much time they have, and what foods their kids are going to eat or not eat. So shifting the sector broadly is a focus of ours. So I'm spending less of my time in markets and in communities. As much that is my favorite part of the work we do, to be honest, and more time trying to engage with policymakers at a government level and also at conferences and engaging with various development organizations and food companies as well. So we also work with a number of food companies who are thinking thoughtfully about designing affordable food products.
Just building on that, the food companies is this market one that people are focusing on and thinking about? Obviously, low income, it is very challenging because there's lower margins. And so, a lot of companies have been moving towards higher return as costs go up. Are you seeing that there is investment and interest in kind of low income, healthy, nutritious, delicious solutions?
Yes, to everything you just said, there is a ton of interest, minus the healthy aspect. So, if you just look at the trends of where all the big companies have been investing in new factories, in new regions of growth, Nestle, Coca Cola, like name your Unilever, name your large company, they have a huge presence across Africa, across Southeast Asia, across Latin America. These markets are really growth markets for them. And they were the ones that initially, honestly, I looked to in Liberia and said, well, if Nestle is selling 100 million Maggie cubes every single day in Central and West Africa, there's clearly a business model here in selling food to the lowest income people, right? And so the question is, can you take these products that are already really tasty and are already really affordable, and can you add in that lens of health and nutrition? And consumers, even in places like Somalia where I work, consumers in Somalia are on TikTok. They may not be in a part of the country that has a functional government, but they are connected to the world. They are following trends. People are looking for food products that are exciting, that are nutritious, that help them grow and thrive, help their families grow and thrive. And so I think this global connectedness is pushing people in a direction that people are wanting better quality foods. Better quality means a lot of things, right? It's not only health and nutrition, it's products that are cool, it's products that are exciting, it's products that taste really good, it's products that save moms time so that moms can not be behind a smoky stove for 4 hours, but instead are out working or out socializing or out living their lives. Anyways, I'm really optimistic that the trends in the sector are pushing towards more and more healthy products to couple that affordability and deliciousness.
So one thing that we like to close all conversations off with is a bit of a recurring question that kind of helps build on that cultural connection we all have with food. So what's something you're really enjoying eating? What's something that you're loving at the moment, or maybe not able to get because of the season or location, but that you're really thinking about on the food side?
Yeah, so I just got back a couple days ago from Thailand. Tailored Food has a new grant to expand our work to Brazil and Thailand, which is exciting. So I was just in Thailand and was immersed in the world of the fresh flavors in Thai cuisine. And so that's my latest obsession, is using ingredients like kaffir lime, using ingredients like lemongrass, various types of chili, and trying to find those ingredients where I am in Canada to use in my own home cooking.
Are you a green curry or a red curry person?
Probably, like, if I had to eat one thing forever, green, but hard call.
It's tough. It's tough. I used to be green all the way, and then I've switched over to red curries now is my predominant kind of. I don't know why. There's something about the red capsicum, the color, it's maybe a little more creamy. I don't know. It really depends how it's done. If you're in Thailand next, you should go do a cooking lesson. When I was there, I did a cooking lesson. It was the most fun ever. You learn really how to make the paste and all of those kinds of things. Lots of good practical lessons there.
Yeah, we actually in northern Thailand, I did do one cooking class.
Oh, cool!
Which to your point was so helpful, and then it was so fun. I felt like I normally am kind of immersing in markets and stuff, so to actually go with the chef to a market and learn from the experts, it was really enjoyable.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on all the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for joining us on the show and sharing it. We wish you all the best.
Thank you. And thank you for the incredible work that you and your team do. And if anyone wants to learn more about what we're up to, you can visit tailoredfood.org or find me on LinkedIn, and would love to talk and share more about what we've learned. And if we can help anyone else working in the space, we're always willing to help others.
Absolutely. We'll put all the links down below so that people can access them. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.